Welcome back to Dickin' Around Outdoors. A couple weeks ago, we put up an unboxing video of our new iKamper Disco. The iKamper Disco is a cooking system that we thought appeared to have a lot of versatility and might just be a solution for a one-stop shop for all our cooking needs on our adventures. At that time, we said that we were not going to tell you what we thought of it until we had the chance to really check it out, do some cooking on it, test the different functionality, and that's what we've been doing for the last couple weeks. We now have done the cooking, we've tested it, we've looked at it, and we've got our opinion of it. Is the iKamper Disco the one cooker to rule them all? Stick around and find out. If you missed my earlier video, and I will link that above, this is the iKamper Disco, and it consists of a few different components. The first component is an aluminum tripod that is adjustable. You can use it on the low setting if you want to cook while you're sitting or on top of a picnic table. This is the medium setting, which I think is a perfect height for me to cook on. And then you have sort of infinitely adjustable legs at the bottom that you can use to raise this up in order to cook with either the disc or a Dutch oven over the fire. And in order to facilitate that, it actually has a chain mechanism that allows you to raise and lower the Dutch oven very easily. Also included is a small table, which is birchwood, that has a nice little towel rack rod that can be used either to hang a towel or for any of your utensils that have a hook on them, as well as a couple indentations for holding a frosty beverage. The cooker itself is a 15.5-inch cast iron disc that's enamel coated, so it's not raw cast iron, and it is scuttle shaped, so it is lower in the middle than on the edges, and below that you have an 8455 BTU Covia burner that can be used either mounted into the tripod as it sits there or taken out and used on a table. It does have removable feet, and the mounting bracket for the system as you see it here does come off, and this will burn isobutane or propane if you have the adapter. So that in a nutshell is the iKamper Disco. Let's get on with the testing. The first thing we wanted to do with the disc was to test the searing and wok-like power of the cooker. So we decided to take it out to a park and cook up some beef and vegetable stir fry. So the first thing we did is threw the beef into the center of the cooker, which is the hottest fry zone, if you will. Once that meat got done, we moved it off to the edges, which, given the disc benefits of having cooler and hotter zones, we moved it off to the edge to make sure that it stayed warm while we were cooking the vegetables. And as you can see, without a rim on the edge, it's very easy to flip a piece of meat off, so you do have to be careful. Once we got the meat moved out of the way, we went ahead and we tossed the vegetables onto the center. We wanted to let those cook down. And once they did, then we recombined everything. We moved the meat off the edge of the pan, put it back in the center so that we warmed it up more than it had been, just to get it hot again. And then we decided to add in our favorite sauce, our favorite stir-fry sauce, which is Trader Joe's teriyaki or soyaki sauce. And we put that on, poured a bit on, and then once we got that on, what we wanted to do was combine everything really well with the sauce and then let it simmer for a few minutes, thicken up just a little bit, and I will say it was a success. It tasted really good, and honestly, this is something that I've never thought about making at the campsite before, so good first test. Next thing we wanted to do was check the tripod, so we hung a 2-quart Dutch oven over the Snow Peak Takibi Solo, and we tested that. We tested the mechanism to raise and lower the Dutch oven, which worked quite well, although I would say that you might want to put a hand on both chains when you're using that. And the beans warmed up really well, which wasn't a surprise, but the mechanism worked really well. Next test that we wanted to do was try a Coleman oven. So we set that on top of the brackets, and despite our best hopes, it did not get hot enough. I think it was just too windy and there's too much space between the burner and the top of the brackets. However, the Omnia oven did work well on the burner. It sets on the actual burner, not on the brackets, so you don't have that gap. We did try the Coleman oven again on this day just to see if it would work, and it did not. So I think the combination of too far from the heat and too thin of metal, it just didn't heat up. On the other hand, any pan that fits on the burner works really well. This 10-inch cast iron Dutch oven, we boiled water, it worked like a charm. We also hung a 12-inch deep Lodge cast iron Dutch oven to make sure that it would hold the weight. It did. It was not a problem. As always, coffee is important at camp, so we decided to just make some percolated coffee just to test the burner's capacity, and it worked fine. It didn't surprise me at all that it worked fine, but it did, and we enjoyed some coffee while we were making the rest of the videos. One unique thing that does come with the disc is a lamp hanger or a light hanger. It is a bit light duty. I hung a Coleman style lantern on it. The Coleman lantern had no fuel, and you can see how much it flexed the bar. I think full of fuel it would have been too heavy. So I wouldn't use it for a Coleman, but for something else, that's fine. I wanted to test the simmering ability, so we threw a magma pan on. We brought it to a boil. As you can see, we've got a rolling boil here. And then I did want to show you the impact of the wind, because this thing is impacted by wind. It could use a better windscreen. But the water, as you saw, did come to a boil, and when we turned it down, it simmered nicely. Some burners don't do that well, so I wanted to test that, and this worked very well. We also put a 13-inch carbon steel pan on top of the brackets. It won't fit. Again, a 10-inch pan is the largest pan you can get actually on the burner, but we wanted to test the evenness, and as you can see, the upwind side of the pan was much cooler than the downwind side, so I think this was blowing the heat downwind, so it wasn't heating the pan up evenly. Given that discrepancy, I decided to test the disc itself. As you can see, it gets plenty hot in the center. We have 600 degrees, which I wouldn't cook over, and you get a pretty dramatic decline in temperatures as you move away from the center. But I did test the difference between the upwind and downwind side. And again, this wasn't a blistering wind, but it was breezy. And what I found is on the upwind side of the disc itself, I was reading a temperature after 5 minutes of 390 degrees. But as I moved to the downwind side, I was getting readings in the 500 to 550 range. So a dramatic difference between up and downwind side. And sort of on the other edges, we were sitting at 400. So, it is different. As we went across the center, you ended up with temperatures 420, 580, 620, 600, and then we started going back down as we moved away from the center. So the center is definitely hot, but it is not even, at least during this test in a windy condition. I want to get it going so we don't scorch our olive oil right off the bat. So we're going to drop down some olive oil, and in it goes some red pepper flakes, garlic, and a scallion. We're just going to simmer that for a few minutes. And given how hot the pan was, I'm going to try to keep it over here on this side a little bit. And by the way, the burner is not on full blast. I did turn it down a bit once I saw how hot it was getting. All right, now that's seared a little bit. I'm going to put a little more olive oil in. And in go our shrimp. We're going to saute these for a few minutes. Absolutely fantastic small plate dish. We love this. If you ever go to a tapas restaurant, this is always on the menu, or quite often. And I did say topless, not topless, just so you heard me correctly. So let's let this shrimp cook. All right, I had to run in and get a plate to put these on. So using the inherent design of the scuttle, I moved the shrimp to the outside to keep it warm but not overcook it. Now we're going to toss it back in. We're going to give a splash of vermouth or white wine, whichever you prefer. Let that cook through, and then these babies are done. One thing I hope you notice is that this disc, although not non-stick, is dang near non-stick. This thing really releases. So I've not had any problem on anything I've cooked on it sticking at all. Okay, we're done. We're going to go ahead and take this off and enjoy some dinner. I'll be back with my final thoughts. So after all the testing is complete, what do we think of the iKamper Disco? If you recall, initially our thought was that this would be a cooker that could potentially allow us to leave everything else at home. And I think that they've come close. In fact, I think iKamper's done an excellent job with this and the design and the construction. But I think there's a couple things that probably fall just a bit short, that it doesn't solve the "this is my only cooker forever." So what do I like? Well, I think first off, the disc. The actual construction of the disc is extremely nice. The cast iron is light, it is easy to maneuver, but it still holds the heat. And the enamel coating on top of it works extremely well. It's super easy to clean up, nothing stuck to it, and it was a joy to cook on. The downside of the disc is that it's 15.5 inches. At the end of the day, what we found is it worked pretty well for 2 people, maybe 4 depending on what you're cooking. But if you're looking for a scuttle type cooker, I think the disc is too small. And why I say that is because the actual cooking area on the disc where it gets the hottest is only about 6 inches. And you very rapidly exceed the next heat zones, so that you really don't have very large heat zones except for that 6 inches in the center. So if you're one of those folks that likes to do the breakfast burritos and have tortillas stacked all around the edge of your scuttle while you're cooking in the middle, the disc is just too small. So from a pure scuttle standpoint, I think it falls down a little bit versus the competition with bigger discs. But again, it's a joy to cook on. The burner itself, I think it has plenty of power. I've read a couple comments where people think that it should be bigger, but honestly, it had plenty of heat to get this thing up to 600 plus. And I don't think you need to go over 600 plus unless you're just searing or doing some really serious wok type cooking. And then I think you should just use a wok. But the burner functions very well. It's a solidly built unit. I love the fact that it can be used either in the stand or off the stand using the integrated legs. The electronic ignition worked great every time. We never had any problems with it. So I think the burner is a strong point. And I think overall, just the construction and the materials that they used are extremely nice. It's solid, it's well thought out. It's very functional by being able to use it as a Dutch oven stand, cooking on the disc over a fire while you've got the burner cooking something else. I think it's just flexible. But where I could see some room for improvement is, number one, depending on what you want, could the disc be larger? But that's for you to decide. Number two, the burner does need, in my opinion, better wind control. As you saw in the video when we were making coffee, if you watched the middle and didn't skip to the conclusions, the burner is impacted pretty heavily by a breeze. I won't call it a gust. I won't even call it a stiff breeze, but it was a breeze and you could see the burner blowing. It needs better wind protection. So iKamper, if you can design that, that would be a plus. The other thing I think that would make it more functional is that you can only get a 10-inch pan on the burner itself. So inside the brackets on the burner, when it's in the stand, which I like because it's really a nice cooking height, 10 inches is pretty much all you're going to get. But we all know that we often cook on pans bigger than that, especially if we're trying to cook for more people. the brackets impinge on that. Now, if you saw, I did get a 13-inch pan sitting on top of the brackets to get pretty hot, but it didn't heat evenly, and I contributed that to the fact that the wind was blowing, and I thought the heat was probably concentrated on one side, the downwind side. So iKamper, why don't we make some brackets that are a little bit shorter, that come to the height of the burner, so that a bigger pan can fit on the burner itself directly while it's in the tripod. And in that way, I think you would get much better heat control and waste a lot less fuel trying to fight the wind. So those two things I think could be improved. The other thing I think that might be a negative is that it's just a relatively large and heavy unit. So all in, I think it was in the 25-pound range, and it's not small. So you've got a bag about yay big, about that wide, plus you've got the disc. So you're not going to pack that in the small vehicles. If you're size constrained on your packing, if you've got a small rig and you're trying to lightweight, I think it's just physically large. But that's not, I won't say that's a negative for this unit, because any Scottle type unit with a big disc is going to have the same problem. But if you do have the space and you like this type of cooking, I think it's a really well-made unit. So I think a quick sum up, I think it's a great unit. I look forward on using it more. I'm very happy with the performance of it. If you could get some wind protection on it, and you could figure out a way that we could use more efficiently larger pans, I think you've got a real winner here. If you like the content, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. If you are a subscriber, welcome back. It's great to see you again. And don't forget to share this with your friends who might be interested. And as always, take care, and we'll see you outdoors.